welcome to the All-Canadian Reptile Girl. I'm Annalise. And if the cops ask, we were bowling yesterday, yeah? Today's video will be a bit of a departure from my normal content. No! Sorry about that. Today's video will be a bit of a departure from my normal content, but it's something that gets requested pretty regularly, and I think you are being very disruptive. Would you stop, sir, please? And I think you're gonna like it. I'm doing a Macklots Python care guide. As a general rule, I don't do care guides. I may talk a bit about care requirements in some of my videos, and I'm happy to answer questions about how I keep my animals in the comments or through messages. But as for dedicated care guides, well, there's a couple of reasons why I don't do them. First, they're not really the kind of videos that I'd like to do. I'd prefer to cover other topics with more in-depth knowledge, fun facts, behavior, biology, that kind of thing. Additionally, this channel and the content that I create are a big part of my homeschooling. Yeah, I'm one of those weird homeschooled kids if you couldn't tell. More often than not, when you tune into my channel, you're watching my homework. And care guides, while they do require learning and research, aren't quite in depth enough to count as educational for the purposes of my homeschool. The other reason is that they're done to death. Well, for most common reptiles anyway, there are thousands of care guides for corn snakes, leopard geckos, ball pythons, bearded dragons, boas, you name it, dozens and dozens of people have probably done a guide on it. With so many care guides out there, I don't really think that there's a lot that I can add to the discussion in most cases. But with Macklots Pythons, I think I can bring something new to the table. If you've been watching my channel for a while now, you know I've talked about these guys a few times, and Hobbs is a regular co-host for all sorts of non-Macklots related content, because he's awesome. But as awesome as I think they are, they're not terribly common in the hobby. It's a hobby, it's one of his nicknames.
Oh.
I just realized that now. Oh. They were apparently much more popular years and years ago, but they've developed a reputation for being pretty bitey, especially as babies, and it seems like fewer and fewer people wanted to work with them, and now you don't see them all that much. But you still can find them, obviously. I mean, I found two, and half the time I can't even find my phone. I'm a teenager, then I lose my phone. I know, it sounds unlikely, but shrug.
Did you just read your stage direction?
Yes. In any case, there really hasn't been a whole lot of good information out there, at least not in an easily digestible way, and most of what's out there is either pretty old or contradictory. Even new stuff is limited. We're still learning how to best keep these guys, and proper information can be found, but it's tough to find a good one-stop shop for Macklots care. Now, before I go into the details of their care, I want to reinforce that this guide is just that, a guide. This is how I take care of my Macklots Pythons. These are not hard and fast rules to be adhered to the letter. Best practices change, so you need to keep current. Another reason why I am reluctant to do care guides. One day my guide might be out of date and people might still be following it. This is meant to be a starting point that should be suitable for your snake, but you need to pay attention to see what your Macklots is telling you about what they want. These guys are hardy snakes and can thrive in a pretty wide range of conditions. They are tropical, so generally warm and kind of humid is what you want, but they can be found at varying elevations, so they're a little bit more cold tolerant than you might think for a tropical snake. They live in rainforests and drier grasslands and hot rocky ridges. Parts of their range also see huge swings in humidity with distinct dry and rainy periods, so they're forgiving on humidity requirements too. Their tolerance helps make them pretty easy to care for, but also makes it tricky to key in to exactly what is the absolute best condition for them, which also can vary snake to snake. It's like this. From September to June, my mom is always wearing a sweater or under a blanket. She likes to be warm. My dad, on the other hand, wears shorts and flip-flops and 3 feet of snow like a crazy person. They're both human, I hope, roughly the same age and size, and while they have similar care requirements, they have very different tolerances and preferences. You're making a face, why?
Your mom and I have care requirements?
You weren't supposed to hear that.
Oh, thanks.
Where was was I? Right. And while they have similar care requirements, they have very different tolerances and preferences. Reptiles aren't that different, and I would hate for someone to take one of my guides as fact and then be providing less than optimum care for their specific snake. Use this as a starting point and make small changes based on how your snake responds, you know? In the wild, you'll find these guys in Southeast Asia and maybe parts of Australia. They're closely related to olive and water pythons, and sources online state that they get between 6 to 9 feet long. Males are supposed to be significantly smaller than females, maxing out at 7 feet. Hobbs here is about 6 years old, and he is 8.5 feet, give or take. Is that our first bump up against bad information? Could be. Or Hobbs could just be a freak. Sorry about that, bud. They are a mostly solid olive greeny brown color with lots of speckles. They are also known as speckled or freckled pythons, after all. Hobbs has retained a lot of his speckling, but it is not unusual for that to fade as they age. In the sun though, they are something else entirely. They have iridophores in their scales that scatter light, giving them a stunning iridescence. The camera does not do them justice, and you really gotta see it yourself. They're just gorgeous. Macklots are active, athletic, arboreal snakes, and they are also quite strong. They are mainly diurnal, hunting on the ground and in the trees, using their keen vision, excellent sense of smell, and acute heat-sensing labial pits along their lips to track their prey. These guys are pretty active, like I said, so you'll need to keep that in mind when you set up their home. More on that in a minute, but let's talk real quick about that bitey reputation that I mentioned a minute ago. The general consensus online is that Macklots are kind of ill-tempered. So vicious. Much scare. Juveniles, especially babies, are prone to taste testing their keepers. Once they get to about 4 feet or so, you can usually tame them down to tolerate handling. But even as adults, a lot of sources say that they're best as a look, don't touch snake. That has not been my experience at all. I've had Hobbs for about 2.5 years now, and from day one, he was very friendly and easy to handle, and he was always been cuddly, even in the pet store. He was exactly like this. He's curious and he's confident and quite a stubborn snake, but not once has he ever exhibited any kind of the defensive or bitey behavior. He gets a bit huffy and pouty when in blue, but generally, he's a happy fella and my friendliest snake. He's always a big hit at birthday parties and seems to genuinely like being out with us and getting some scritches or massages and meeting new people. I got Callie, my female, about a year ago, and she was about 4 feet at the time, and I was really curious to see what her personality would be like. Yep, the same. Exactly the same. Now, I received a couple of messages from some of my earlier videos and posts on Reddit questioning this. One in particular claiming to have bred Macklots in the past and kind of implying that I was misrepresenting their behavior, only showing them once they've calmed down and that getting them out of their enclosure must be an entirely different story. Okay, that could certainly be the case. It's not, but how would you know? So, a few months back, I shot a bit of footage for a different video that I didn't end up making, which proves that even in the enclosure, taken completely by surprise, my Macklots Pythons are not evil biting machines who can just somehow turn it off for the camera. Here, see for yourself. Callie is in her hide, probably because she is in blue. A lot of snakes get more ornery or defensive when in blue. I think this actually affords us a chance to observe my Macklots in a situation that is more likely to demonstrate a bit of that nasty reputation. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to tap on the hide to wake her up, like knocking on the door, and just make sure she's awake. And then I'm going to lift up the hide without looking. I'm going to reach in my soft, fleshy hand and take her out. Let me be clear. I do not recommend this in any way. I know I'm smiling, but that's also because I'm a tiny bit nervous. Just 1 second. I don't recommend this. This is not normally how I interact with my snakes. I am doing this for demonstration purposes as the worst case scenario, to show you at home that even subadult Macklots aren't all bitey monsters. I know my snake, and I am 98.72% certain that Callie is not going to react defensively. That's where the tiny bit of nervousness comes from. This is not a good idea for you to emulate, right? It's a one-off, strictly for education purposes kind of thing. Yeah? Okay, let's go. Are we ready? Callie. Hi, sweet girl. Oh, I know you're... Oh, come here. Oh, you're ready to shed. Oh, I'm so sorry for waking you up. And there we go. I'll step down so you can all see me properly. I hope you still can. Okay, first off, I'm so happy she didn't bite me. So that went great. Thank goodness. I was really sure it would go well, but still. Again, don't do this, but there was no defensive behavior. She is a sweetheart. She did seem startled that I touched her. Like when I touched her, she like turned to me. But other than that, it was nothing. I just want to reiterate, I've said this before, but I want to just make sure that it's fresh in your mind. She came like this. We didn't have to socialize her or Hobbs. Yes, once we got them, we continued to keep them more socialized. She is just this sweet. That is how we got her. And according to her previous owner, that is how she was since she was little. So I hope this helps prove to you that even adult, subadult, and baby Macklots, from what we hear about the babies, aren't all nippy or defensive as they are usually portrayed to be. There are always going to be outliers, whether those outliers for Macklots are the nasty ones, or maybe Hobbs and Callie are the outliers. But 2 for 2 with me for nice Macklots that are completely unrelated from different provinces, and they're both absolute sweethearts. So I don't know, I guess we'll have to wait until they're older and have babies to see about the baby Macklots. So that was Callie, but how about some footage of my dad waking Hobbs up from a nap a few days ago? Again, I am not condoning this as a good idea. It's not. But I think it does a good job of illustrating my point. Clearly, my 2 snakes are legitimately easygoing, friendly snakes. And I don't think this has to be as rare as people think. I think folks might have had a harder time with Macklots in the past because they weren't meeting their needs. I'm not talking about heat, humidity, or food here. Those are pretty straightforward. I'm talking about emotional and intellectual needs. Stay with me here. A lot of older footage and resources seems to show folks keeping them a lot like ball pythons. Sparse enclosures with not a lot of height or enrichment. For as intelligent, active, and curious as they are, not to mention how arboreal they are, that does not give them the stimulation that they might have needed, and that can manifest in stress or defensive behavior. I covered it all in detail in my last video on these guys, but basically, that's my hypothesis. Give these guys lots to do, and you'll have a much better time interacting with them. Is she reaching out for the pothos? Kelly! So let's start with the enclosure. Bigger is better. Even as a juvenile, a 40-gallon tank is not going to cut it long term. A 75-gallon is not going to do it either. With their activity level and arboreal nature, they need vertical space, and the more that you can give them, the better. So that means you're probably looking at a custom home when they're full grown. Hobbs is in a 4-foot by 4.5-foot by 7-foot enclosure. We did make it ourselves. I'd prefer to give him a little bit more ground space, but aside from when he sleeps, he is never on the ground and he is always up in the branches. Callie, on the other hand, seems to divide her time a little bit more evenly between draping herself on the branches and cruising on the floor. Her enclosure, for now, is 6 foot by 2 foot by 2 foot. Eventually, I will have to build something with a little bit more height. And by that, I mean I'll have to sucker my dad into building something with a little bit more height.
Wait,
You're going to want to put...
What?
You're going to want to put in as many branches, shelves, cork, vines, hides. Just put in as many climby bits in as you can. They will use it all. I cannot stress this enough. They're very smart and active, and you'll need to exercise their mind and body as much as possible. So, rearrange their stuff every few months. Take them out as much as you can and give them lots of stuff to explore inside of their enclosure and outside. For substrate, I have Hobbs in a bioactive enclosure, even though he squished and killed most of his plants, so it's soil topped with a layer of cocoa core and corpses of plants. Callie is on a mix of cocoa fiber and cocoa core. Cypress mulch would work well too. Basically, you want something that holds some humidity but doesn't get moldy. So not aspen or paper towels unless it's for a quarantine setup. For heat, I keep their ambient hot sides around 30 to 32 degrees Celsius. Hobbs likes it a little hotter than Callie, so his basking spot is around 38 to 40 degrees Celsius, and Callie is around 35 degrees. Because Hobbs' house is so tall, we use a little USB fan to blow some of the warm air down to the bottom, which is the cool end, to keep it at around 25 to 27 degrees Celsius. They are diurnal, so the heat I do provide is from overhead lights on a thermostat, of course. And it is important to give them a proper day-night cycle. These guys can absorb and metabolize calcium just fine without UVB, but because they are so active during the day in the wild, I prefer to emulate that as much as possible, so I do provide them with UVB lighting. You don't have to though, it's just something that I prefer to do. If it's safe to do so, you can take them outside for some natural sunlight. Both of mine love going outside, but like I said before, they are very confident snakes and are not shy about exploring and climbing anything and everything that they want to, so you need to keep a close eye on them so they don't go up your downspout. Humidity was a little tricky to figure out. Guides online will say 55 to 60% is required with a bump up when they are in shed. That was what I stuck to initially with Hobbs, and it worked well. He was happy and healthy, no issues with shedding. It worked fine. But looking at what they experienced in the wild, I started to play with that a bit and have found that both of mine seem to prefer bigger swings in the humidity rather than a consistent level. Depending on the ambient humidity in my house, I let it rain once a week to 10 days by emptying an entire sprayer into their enclosure. Just really soak everything, not just the ground, everything. But make sure not to hit the heat lamps, those explode. Both really seem to like the rainy days, and if they are not out and about already playing around, they will come out and play in the water. I leave everything alone the following day, then I turn on a fogger on low and let the humidity slowly drop. When it drops to about 50-55%, I'll do little spray downs to kind of keep it around the 50 to 60% mark, until it is time to let it rain again and spike the humidity. With this approach, I find their scales looking nicer, still no problem shedding, and they're a lot more active than when keeping their humidity at a steady state. A lot of sources say that they like to soak, so I provide both of mine with water bowls big enough to curl up in. I have never seen either of them do this, but that's okay. The giant water dish helps with humidity too. Feeding is fun. They will strike and eat straight on, sideways, even upside down, inside out, it doesn't matter. They are enthusiastic eaters, and usually none of this, oh, it's half a degree too cold, or meh, you wiggled it 3% faster than I like that you can get with ball pythons. Callie eats a medium rat every week, and Hobbs eats a large rat every other week. Sometimes he gets an extra snack if one of our other snakes refuses a meal, but generally, he's fed bi-week. They eat a variety of food in the wild, so you can switch it up and offer them quail as something new. They'll definitely appreciate that. For the 2 winters that we have had him so far, Hobbs has gone off food from about November, December to February, March. This is not like a ball python going off food where they kind of just stop eating and hunker down. For Hobbs, his activity level actually shoots way up during this time. It seems to be more about finding love than getting a full belly. Hobbs is always happy to come out, but during this time, he is extremely motivated to actively be outside of his enclosure. He fiddles with the latch, he tests the screen on top, he'll bump the glass and glare at you if you don't open up. He has even grabbed sticks with his tail and banged them around the walls. My dad works from home about 4 feet from him, and that was always fun on conference calls, wasn't it? We have also found that Callie exhibited very similar behavior this winter too. Not quite as determined as Hobbs, but still definitely way more keen to escape than usual.
Hobbs never did this.
No, he didn't. I don't think he could have fit, though.
He just opened the doors.
He just opened the doors or popped open the vents.
Okay, so she busted the wood off that was glued and then bent the plexiglass.
Yeah.
Nicely done.
A few other minor things to note before we wrap up. First of all, their tail is prehensile, and they will grab things when you least expect. You've got them out and everything's fine, you're having a great time, and then you walk by the table with a glass of water on it, and right as you think, oh, wouldn't it be lovely if I had a drink from that water? Boop, that tail darts out and that glass is on the floor. What else? Oh, they love faces. Like, they really like faces. You've probably seen it yourself in my videos. He even did it at the beginning of this video while we were still setting up. They are always just smooshing up right into my face or resting on top of my head. Glasses or hats are unacceptable and will most likely be pulled off if you dare to wear them in the presence of your Macklots Python. They are also quite talkative. Both of mine are just always huffing and puffing as they move about. I've had them checked by the vet. There are no signs of respiratory infections. They just really like to talk. Initially, I thought it was just something that Hobbs did, but when we got Callie, we saw the exact same behavior. With a bit of time, you'll even pick up what they're trying to tell you. A long, slow means I don't really like what you're doing. I get this if I need to take them out of their enclosure when they don't want to, or when I bring them inside after being out in the yard on a nice sunny day. That's my favorite, even though it is kind of heartbreaking when they figure out that I'm heading inside and taking them away from the nice soft grass. They will stretch out way behind me, slowly deflating as they go. No, please, bring me back out. I don't deserve to go inside yet. Anyways, on the flip side of that, when they've had enough time out of their enclosure and they want to go home, I'll get like a face in my eye or up against my ear. Hobbs did against the back of my neck last week, and it's just a sharp pft of air. A little bit alarming if you're not expecting it or you're not used to it yet, but after you figure out what it all means, it's all good. So, fair warning, you're gonna get a tongue up your nose or in your eye or in your ear. It's uncomfortable. It's weird, it's gross, but it will happen. I think that covers the highlights, at least for Callie and Hobbs. Macklots Pythons are great snakes. They're just so switched on and active and curious. I love hanging out with them or just watching them do their thing in their enclosure. They are immensely rewarding animals to care for, and I am so grateful to have a pair of these awesome snakes. I'm also super excited to try and breed these two down the road to see what the babies would actually be like firsthand. Thank you all so much for watching. A special thanks to my patrons on Patreon. You guys are awesome and directly help support Hobbs, Callie, and the rest of my scaly friends. As a patron, for as little as $2 a month, you can have access to behind-the-scenes stuff, additional vlog posts, updates on animals and projects, and early access to my videos. Head on over to patreon.com/allcanadianreptilegirl to check out what's available. If you have a Macklots Python, I hope that this helps, and I'd love to hear about your experiences in keeping them. By sharing our experiences, we can help to grow the knowledge base out there. So let me know in the comments below. And if you don't have a Macklots Python but are planning on getting one, I really hope that you found this care guide informative. They really are incredible and underrated snakes. Anyway, that's it for today. Until next time, remember to nurture all nature. Bye! Say goodbye, Hobbs. He says bye. Hi. Hi. What are you doing? Can I help you? You're a little circus snake, aren't you? Sorry, right. Nicely put. Oh, there was a tongue in my eye.